New York City police officer tonight accused of trying to sell large quantities of fentanyl, heroin, and cocaine.
So this NYPD officer was drug trafficking while on duty? We got a lot to talk about. All right, today we got a story that sounds like it was ripped straight out of an episode of Breaking Bad. Let's go to the headlines. Veteran NYPD officer who boasted about loving her job allegedly sold top quality fentanyl and heroin all while on duty, says the feds. This is Grace Rosa Baez. Born and raised in the Bronx, New York, Baez joined the NYPD back in 2012. Baez is huge on social media, posting these pictures of her in her uniform and her just out looking good and having fun. Now, 8 years after joining the force in 2020, Baez comes under investigation due to allegations of misconduct, and she's placed on modified duty.
The arrest of the NYPD cop is kind of shocking because she was already being investigated for misconduct allegations. She was on desk duty.
All right, so here's where things get crazy. Enter Cesar Martinez. He's a 42-year-old man from Yonkers, and he's dating Baez. Now, they meet a guy who I'm going to call confidential FBI informant number 1, or CI1 for short. Now, on October 9th, 2023, Baez and Martinez had a conversation with this FBI confidential informant. Now, Baez, who doesn't know she's talking to a confidential FBI informant, is offering to sell that informant drugs. Baez tells the informant that she can sell him 2 keys of fentanyl for $30K per key, and Baez offered 400 grams of heroin with the pricing to be negotiated later. Now, the confidential informant is not believing they're serious, so says he needs some samples. Baez, Martinez, and the confidential informant all agree to meet up again on October 16th, 2023. Okay, let me pause this video and ask you a question. Have you used Google Chrome's Incognito Mode between 2016 and 2023? If so, you may be entitled to up to $5,000 in compensation. Now, if you use Incognito Mode, Google was secretly tracking your data despite their promises that your search history and personal information was not going to be collected or tracked. So if you've used Google's Incognito Mode during the period of 2016 to 2023, you could be eligible to join the lawsuit at no cost to you. Visit browserclaim.com to see if you qualify. Now, full disclosure, my firm isn't the only one involved. For instance, one of the largest firms in the country, Morgan & Morgan, is also asking for clients for this lawsuit. Now, for more information and to get started, visit browserclaim.com today to protect your rights and hold Google accountable. Now, the link is in the description and in the pinned comment. Now, back to the video. Now, Baez meets the CI in Yonkers near the shared home she had with Martinez. Officer Baez then hands the confidential FBI informant a Mentos candy container that contains small bags of white powder. This was taken back to the FBI lab, and the substance in those little white bags was confirmed to be fentanyl. The next day, October 17th, 2023, Officer Baez reaches out to the confidential informant and says she has a sample of heroin that she's ready to share with them. She meets up with the FBI confidential informant, hands him a white bag with a white powdery substance inside. The FBI takes a picture of it and sends it to the lab, confirming it is indeed heroin. So this cop is now giving over both fentanyl and heroin to a federal confidential informant for the FBI and says she has more. So the NYPD cop, her boyfriend, and the confidential FBI informant all come to an agreement. The cop is going to sell the FBI informant 1 key of heroin for $25,000 and 800 grams of fentanyl, pricing to be determined on purity. Now, Officer Baez also let the confidential FBI informant know that she had cocaine coming in and it would be available for a purchase in a couple of weeks. Now, 800 grams of fentanyl is a huge amount of fentanyl. Here are some fun facts about 800 grams of fentanyl. First, 800 grams of fentanyl has a street value of over $100,000. Here's a fentanyl bust from Kentucky where police grabbed a total of 441 grams, and that had a street value of $58,000. Now, 800 grams of fentanyl is enough to kill 400,000 people. So we are talking about a lot of fentanyl. Now, 2 days later, Baez gets together all the drugs and plans to meet with the FBI confidential informant to hand over the drugs, and she is going to get her money. This picture shows exactly what she handed over to the confidential FBI informant. 640 grams of suspected fentanyl, labeled as 640 manzana, 1 key of heroin, labeled number 1, 400 grams of heroin labeled 400 and into the package with a sampling of fentanyl. So after the exchange, federal authorities then arrested Officer Baez and her boyfriend as they approached their apartment. Now, federal authorities found more drugs in the apartment, which made it even worse for Officer Baez.
This is NYPD police officer Grace Rosa Baez, who resigned on Friday after 12 years on the force when she was accused of making drug deals with her Yonkers boyfriend.
New York City police officer tonight accused of trying to sell large quantities of fentanyl, heroin, and cocaine. The U.S. Attorney's Office says 11-year veteran Grace Rosa Baez and her housemate Cesar Martinez hid drugs inside various items like a Mentos container. A confidential source says the pair sold a sample of fentanyl and was forming the groundwork for a wholesale trafficking operation.
So obviously the feds charge Officer Baez and her boyfriend with drug trafficking, and it seems like an open and shut case because this was a simple buy and bust. Now the government has a really solid case unless Baez and her boyfriend could argue some type of coercion or entrapment, but they were caught selling drugs to a confidential government informant.
That a female NYPD officer was getting arrested in Yonkers for allegedly making fentanyl and heroin deals. Her alleged client was a paid confidential source with the FBI.
Now, Baez and her boyfriend were indicted by the federal government and the Southern District of New York on narcotics trafficking. Now, what makes this worse for Officer Baez is that she did some of this illegal activity while actively on duty with the NYPD. So, Officer Baez and her boyfriend were facing a lifetime in prison for selling major amounts of narcotics to a confidential FBI informant. Officer Baez pleaded guilty. Now, the terms of her plea deal were that she would plead guilty to count 1 of the indictment, that's narcotics trafficking. Now, in exchange for this guilty plea, Baez would spend 5 years in prison. She would also get 3 years supervised release after her prison sentence is served and pay about $20,000 in fines. So, 5 years for selling major narcotics from cocaine, heroin, and fentanyl in New York City, and we're talking about major weight? Do you think this officer got off a little light? Now, on one hand, she was facing over 100 years if she was found guilty on all the charges, and on the other hand, she's serving 5 years after a plea bargain. So do you think she gave something up to get 5 years, or do you think she just said, hey, you got me, I'll do my 5 years plus 3 years supervised release? And we haven't even talked about state charges, because this was an NYPD officer in New York selling heroin, cocaine, and fentanyl. Matter of fact, did sell it within the state of New York. So you may have state charges that are coming down the line. So let me know how you feel about this case in the comment section. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe to like our YouTube stuff. My name is Ed the Lawyer, and I'm going to see you in the next one. Peace.